At one point when I was raising my Series A, I had 60 no's, 60. And each no was, 4 meetings in or something, right? I didn't consider a no as like a pass on an email. It it's painful each time. It's like PTSD to say no to an entrepreneur when you've been said you had a dream so big and you've been said no to.
Welcome to the latest episode of Maker's Mindset. I'm your host, Nancy Twine. This episode, I'll be in conversation with Whitney Casey, partner at L Catterton, one of the world's leading consumer-focused private equity firms. She's also the co-founder of Tally Health, a biotech company dedicated to extending lifespan and improving health through personalized, science-driven aging interventions. She's co-founded the company with longevity expert David Sinclair, and her career spans from anchor and correspondent for CNN, ABC News, and CBS to several senior roles at Match Group. She's earned 2 Emmys as a best-selling author and has been recognized at WWD's Women Leaders in Business and on CNBC's Disruptor 50 list. Let's go ahead and jump in. Welcome. So excited to have you here. This is going to be a really fun conversation. And, it's interesting because you began your career as an anchor and a correspondent, and then you held several senior roles at Match Group, the dating company. And then since then, you founded and were CEO of Finery, and now you're a partner at L Catterton. What was the journey that brought you to where you are today?
Oh, journey. I always think of that word as like a very sweet packaged word, right? It's a journey. I'm like, no, it's a shitstorm. It is not a journey. That is so, because if you actually look at the trajectory going from being a CNN correspondent to then, working in tech and a data app and being an entrepreneur and then working in private equity, it just looks like that there's no trajectory that actually gets you there.
Well, it's funny because I remember when I first pulled up your LinkedIn profile, I was like, whoa, this is like so all over the place, but super cool at the same time. Like, how did this happen?
Yeah, shitstorm. I mean, I think, especially when I talk to younger people about setting goals, I always think like, well, how do you set your goals? Like, if you do have a goal and you want to get there, like this journey or this shitstorm, whatever you want to call it, that I was on to become where I am now. And there was this book, you probably have read it, knowing you. It's by a guy named Oliver Burkeman, and it's called Time Management for Mortals. And this guy basically says, like, set some goals and put them on a piece of paper and realize like the top 3 things that have happened in your life, the most seminal moments in your life that changed the trajectory of your life. If you try to look, and I want to ask you this actually, because if you try to look to see how you actually got there, no goal got you there.
Completely.
It was pure, like, seeing an opportunity, seizing it, and life is happening in all the in-betweens.
Completely.
And so to say to someone, what are your goals? Let's see your 5-year goals.
Right.
And for me to try to tell them I set goals and that's how I got here is a total, like, sham.
Right. Because sometimes just things happen in life that cause you to change course. I mean, for me, after losing my mom, it created this opportunity for me to really think about, do I want to be working in finance? What else do I want to do? I started thinking back, to the childhood memories I had with my mom making products. And then it was just this unraveling of ultimately where it was I was supposed to be. So I hear you on so many levels of that.
And you had to be able to seize the opportunity. You had to leave Goldman.
Yeah.
And you had to say, this I want to capture. This moment with my mom, I want to capture. I want to make a business out of it. And it takes huge risk.
Exactly.
And so it's not just like goals along the way. I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that and then I'm going to get here.
Right.
So you have an idea of what you want, but you have to take a huge risk to get there. And most people aren't willing to take the risk that it is going to take to seize that opportunity. So when you see things like you saw this opportunity in hair care, you also had this moment where you really felt like attached to your mom that you wanted to recreate. And then the third prong of that is that you wanted to take a risk.
Completely.
And those all had to align up. And then also all the luck that happened in between.
Right. Exactly.
Like I look at Finery and I think I wouldn't have thought of course I thought I wanted that business to exist. But had I not gone on a random girls trip where I met my co-founder, it would have never been successful.
Right.
She was a key to that. And I would never have met her and said, let's start a company. I had to become friends with her first. So you can't really back into the journey.
Exactly.
You just kind of seize the opportunity.
And sometimes it's as simple as just knowing that you want something greater. You want something different than exists, even if you don't know what it is. And then life kind of happens. But one of the things that you just said was that to be a risk taker, you have to have a level of confidence, belief in yourself, but also this level of like relentlessness. And a lot of people have that either just inherently in them or they develop it through experiences. Where did you get that from?
I think you always have to kind of trace back to your caregivers. And that's, the first 18 months out of the womb is kind of how you foment your fearlessness or your fearfulness or your perfectionism or, whatever it is. And I think, both my parents were high achievers, but more in the realm of the way that people saw them. My dad was a football player for the University of Florida and the Falcons, and he was an All-American and everybody worshiped him. And my mom was, the perfect homecoming queen wife, and they all thought they needed to have kids. And frankly, my dad ends up being a, deadbeat dad who leaves us, and he becomes an alcoholic and has a career and does all of those things. And just, I wanted his approval so badly. And then my mom's a single mom who was a teacher and, we had no money. So she had to go back and educate herself to get her master's to make a better life for us. And so obviously couldn't pay attention to us either. And so for me, it's like success was my attention.
Right.
If I kept doing things right, the teachers would pay attention to me. Other parents would pay attention to me. The athletic coach would pay attention to me, but my parents were not. And it's not a great thing. Like if you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, they have a lot of struggle in their past because they're trying to overcome something or prove something. And unfortunately, I had a sister who it didn't end up like that. She, when you are lacking that kind of attention, you seek it from something. And as I said, I sought it from success or pushing to whatever success looked like. And, she sought it from substances. So alcohol and drugs. And so we ended up, we're very close and ended up so disparate. But both look at the way that we started is like we both needed attention we weren't getting.
Right. And I really relate to that in a lot of ways. And, when I think about the catalyst for me starting my company was after my mom died. And you're right, like you have different choices. Some people deal with that by turning to drugs or alcohol or whatever. And for me, it was about taking that energy and like channeling it into something, doing something, filling my time and my headspace with that. So that's really, really powerful.
The relationship we have with our parents, whatever it did to form us at the beginning, and we're in control of it, but truly, like we start in a way, and the way that people look at my life, it's so like people would say, "Oh, that's congratulations! Like you've done such a good job." To my mom, and she would say, "Well, if I say like I made Whitney who she is, then I had to make her sister who she was too," and so. It's kind of, it's celebrated that I am successful, but if you really look at it, both of us were really just wanting attention from our caregivers.
Right. And it just translated into different outcomes, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that success is happiness either, though.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, it's really interesting because you have had such a dynamic career, and after your first company, Finery, that you started was acquired by Stitch Fix, you then went into private equity, which is like a really interesting move because a lot of times when people sell their company, they go on to, start a new company or take time off. What led you to go into private equity after selling your company?
It is not, again, a natural step forward. I actually took a job as an EIR, an entrepreneur in residence with L Catterton, just because I was kind of trying to figure it out. There were a lot of businesses I was looking at. And as a CEO and a founder yourself, like the CEO is the worst role. It's just it's like everything falls on you. You're like head of HR, You're basically head of the P&L.
Right.
And I just was like, oh, I don't want to do that. Every CEO job I was looking at, I kept thinking, I just gave up that role. I want to chill out for a second. So yeah, maybe I'll try an entire industry that I have no idea what I'm doing in.
Yeah.
Great way to chill out. Not at all. But being an EIR gave me an opportunity to take a look at who I was working with for a little bit before I decided to like, go into full partner mode. And it's an interesting group of people because if you kind of just look at the industry as a whole, it's quite a few men.
Right.
And especially in consumer, where you think about consumer is 80% of every dollar is spent by a woman.
Wow.
We run the dollar in the household. We run the healthcare decisions, the financial decisions. Women run them.
Yeah.
But when you look at the consumer investor landscape, it's not filled with women.
Right.
And it seems counterintuitive, but you can see how, a lot of women that even start in banking move and find things that they see more women in.
Right.
And so you've got to kind of keep the women at the leadership level, but it's hard to get them there.
Right.
And so the group that I met, I mean, obviously consumer is a great space to be in for a woman because, we're using all the products we're investing in. We're on the cutting edge. We're looking, we're finding needs. We're seeing white space. They're products we want. And so it's exciting actually to sit in a room with men and have kind of an edge in that way.
Right.
You actually use the product.
It's interesting, right? Because going into such a male-dominated industry, a lot of people may feel like they have to prove themselves or kind of reinvent how they show up to be accepted. But was that your experience, or did it evolve to that over time? What was that like going into it?
Well, they gave me a long personality test, like a legitimate.
Wow.
It's called the Hogan. And one of the sort of derailers that came back, and it actually was sort of off the charts. I mean, it's from 0 to 100, and I got 100 on it. It was the word bold. And that's typical of entrepreneurs. And therefore, entrepreneurs aren't typically investors because you really have to be good at managing risk. And the whole theory of being an entrepreneur is looking at risk in a totally different way. So to put someone who is very bold in the risk category in a room full of people who are used to just really assessing risk so they can protect the capital, I think it's actually a really great combination. We're good for each other. I push back a lot on vision. They are really great at pattern recognition. And so vision with pattern recognition is a really great combination because you have to be able to see what the company may do down the road. All the best companies pivot. The original idea is never the idea that you actually make money with, really. And so being able to see the pivot is what an entrepreneur could do. Being able to see all of the roadblocks ahead because of the patterns and pattern recognition are what really good investors do. So together, we learn a lot from each other.
So it's interesting. So you didn't go into this feeling like, okay, I have to fit in some mold. I have to figure out how I can kind of, conform myself to the norm of the group. You said, actually, I'm different. And that's a good thing because with that, we're going to probably be better than we would have been.
Well, what do you do when you think about mitigating risk? I mean, because if it's investing is a risk game, if you want risk mitigants, you put things in diversify.
Right.
Exactly. It's just exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you get it.
Yeah. Right.
But yes, private equity is just starting to get it. Yeah. And fortunately, my partners, they're very open to my ideas. At first, it was a lot. I'm sure my whole approach is so different than theirs. But the fact that they took a risk, they didn't just take a banker that then also worked in private equity, got an MBA and then brought a woman up that way. They said, this is a woman that has created a business. We are investing in businesses that are created. Why is there not someone around the table to look at all of the ways around this business and mitigate risk, even though she seems risky?
Right. That totally makes sense. I mean, I guess on the other side, I know I have a lot of entrepreneurs that I mentor, and a thing that comes up a lot, especially in industries where you have entrepreneurs that are typically women who are pitching male investors, oftentimes there's a lot of intimidation. There's this feeling like, the investor's not going to resonate with what it is I have to offer because they're not my consumer. What type of advice do you give to someone that's experiencing that?
It's a challenge. I'm not going to say it's easy to pitch a tampon business to a group of men that have never used a tampon. And there have been times like I've had to stop and say, okay, for instance, how many times do you think a woman uses a tampon during her period in a month? Because we need to talk about the unit economics of tampons and how we're going to make this business reach 25 million in revenue. Right. So there's education. You have to be fearless about the education. Right. And then you also have to learn how, to allow them to be the one using the product, even if they're not. Right. I had it with Finery. We read people's emails to actually find out what they were buying. We read the receipts. And then we would extrapolate their clothing purchases from the receipts using AI. And then, but most men would say, well, why would a woman ever give you access to their email? And so we had to convince them that women really did want to have their clothing on their phone. And so we did that by saying, think about Spotify on your phone, or think about Seamless or Grubhub. Yeah. When you're going home, you want to decide what to eat, you look at your phone to see what you're in the mood for.
Yeah, right.
So you have to come up with the analog.
Exactly. And I think that's key, because at the end of the day, investors, whether male or female, everyone wants a great business and they want to make money. And so long as you can educate on the why your opportunity makes sense for that, then I think that's how you sort of level the playing field a bit.
I always tell entrepreneurs, this is same with life. You have to be a good storyteller.
Right.
And if you can't convince a room of men, you're not telling the story right.
Right.
You have to learn how to tell. You have to tell your story if you want a job. Yeah. If you want to go to a good school, you have to tell a good story. If you want to sell a product, you have to tell a good story. Mm-hmm. And if you can't tell a good story, you have not studied the room enough. Yeah. And your story needs to be different in every room.
It's interesting because obviously you're an entrepreneur, then you go to the private equity space. How has your background as an entrepreneur impacted who you are as an investor?
The no's are really hard for me still. I at one point when I was raising my Series A, I had 60 no's, 60. Wow. And each no was, 4 meetings in or something, right? I didn't consider a no as a pass on an email. It's painful each time. It's like PTSD to say no to an entrepreneur when you've been said, you had a dream so big and you've been said no to. Yeah. So the no's, I think, are harder. No one loves a no. My partners don't love no's either. They're not like cold, callous assholes. They're not like, yeah, no, it was easy. But when you've built something and it's a dream and you believe in it so much and you've been said no to, you saying no is a different thing. Right. And so the no's are hard. But what it is that is easier is the empathy, product empathy, the empathy behind what it takes from 0 to 1, really the execution and creation of taking an idea that literally just pops into your head and creating a company that humans work for, that one widget is sold. Right. If you've done that and you sit in a room with other investors that haven't, I think you're on a different plane sometimes.
Absolutely. So we're going to pivot a little bit because I love asking entrepreneurs, executives about how they think about health and wellness. And I think you have a very unique perspective given your involvement with Tally Health. And I want to get a sense of your thoughts on longevity and also just a little bit of background into how you connected with David Sinclair and how this whole business came about.
I always think about some, founder stories. There's always some kind of apocryphal story, like this happened and that. But in this case, it does sound very apocryphal because we actually had a tweet that went out, and it was in March. I can find it for you, but I met David through a friend who was doing a SPAC, and I said, there's got to be something we could commercialize in this big lab. Look, you're curing blindness. The guy is actually curing blindness and Alzheimer's, reversing aging, doing some, unbelievable pharma and biotech. But commercially, I was looking around the lab and there's got to be something in here. And there was a test that he was telling me about, some technology that can actually determine how interventions are working, on mice. And when they're working with all these drugs, they need to have like a before and after, and they need to be able to do it cheaply. And so, genetic testing is not cheap. It is getting cheaper. Reading a whole genome is considerably less expensive than it was before. But to really commercialize something where you can kind of make it where everyone can afford it, you find that in a lab. You don't find that. You're not someone, a business person is not doing that. In labs, you have no money. So you really need to be able to find ways to cheaply measure things. So he had this test where you could measure the way that some of these aging interventions were working. And I said, oh, consumers would love that. Consumers would love to know how fast they're aging, if they're aging faster than the normal population. Right. And he was like, I don't, that's kind of like scary and maybe a little bit worrisome. If you are aging faster, I don't know if consumers would want that. I said, well, let's just you have all these people on Twitter, let's do a tweet. So we did a tweet. If you could you could do a DNA sample and quickly know whether you're 10 years older or 10 years younger than your real age, would you? And the deal was, if I was right, then he would license the technology to me and we could start this business. And if I was wrong, I would just shut up. And I think he was just like, I hope she shuts up. And 92% of the people wrote back, wow. Yes, I'd want to know. I'd want to know.
Wow.
And so we started the business based on this tweet. And then we had, we had to take this technology that was in this Harvard lab that he's been running and commercialize it, which sounds like, oh yeah, that's all we had to do. Yeah. But to take something at one of the best education.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Sitting in a Harvard lab with the best PhDs in the world and bring it to a commercial lab to try to reproduce is no easy feat. And so we hired the world's best scientists. Of course, David's, the scientists were easy to find in his world.
Sure.
But we ended up finding a great lab. We have an unbelievable head of science, a female PhD, and an MBA from MIT. Some unbelievable bioinformaticians, which was like a whole tongue-tying word for me. It's basically a really fancy data scientist. Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of practice, a lot of work with them.
Yeah.
And when I hire them, I have to know who they are.
Of course.
And so we created a test that it determines how fast you're aging on the inside.
Wow.
So if you can't measure the rate at which you age, you can't fix it.
Yeah, right.
But you need something that's at the top to measure it. And there are all these interventions. If you think about it, all the vitamins we take, the exercise, eating, our sleep, we can measure all those things. We measure our gut microbiome. We measure with our Oura rings how we sleep, our 8 sleeps, the mattresses that we use. Everything is all like IoT sending information back.
Yeah.
But it's very vertical. It tells you the one thing, like once you see how you sleep, really how much more information, how many steps you take, how much more information do you need? Right. But how is that all working together to make a healthier lifestyle, right, to make you live longer?
Exactly.
You don't know. And this test kind of sits at the top. We call it the credit score for the body.
Wow. And so how does, access to all of this information, the resources, the test, how is that redefined how you think about your own wellness?
That it's completely fixable, that it's totally in my hands. Because as David would say, only 10% of your longevity sits in your genes. The rest of it is lifestyle. So 90% of the way we age is determined by lifestyle and is fixable. But you need to be able to measure it to fix it.
And so what does lifestyle look like for you? And I will tell you, in my community of entrepreneurs, one of the things that we talk about a lot is this sacrifice that we feel like we have to make between the time spent running and operating our businesses and then finding the time for healthy lifestyle activities. So how do you balance the two, and what are some of your go-to modalities?
Well, the interesting thing is when we started and the business was just being created and I'd taken all the tests, and of course I'd measured every 6 months, every 4 months, then every 3 months. And when we launched the test, I lost 4 years. So 4 years of my longevity path, I was already younger in my epigenome. But because of the stress of launching this business, I lost 4 years. Wow. So you consider stress in a way differently when you actually see empirically that you lose time on this planet. This is what this test told me. My test told me, launching my test showed me that I was losing time because I wasn't taking care of myself. And so mindfulness, which I thought was sort of hooey, like really mindfulness, it will aid you if you don't take the time. You will have less time if you don't take the time. And I think the way that I look at longevity and wellness now, because it's so empirically measured in our tests, that I can say, okay, I was eating a lot of red meat. I was stressed. I wasn't taking the time to be mindful, to be calm, to meditate, and I was sleeping. But interestingly, my DNA, sleep is not. You basically, there are 5 things that are the hallmarks of aging. If you can't do all 5, you want to be able to rank order them.
Right.
Like
exactly.
do the top 2 because they have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
So our test also tells you that, which is awesome. And mindfulness was number 1 for me.
Wow.
And sleep was last. So I can, but I sleep best.
Yeah.
So I'm so mad. I'm like, but I do this best. But it's the little
thing you do best matters the least.
Matters the
right?
least,
Of course.
yes.
That's
Yeah.
how it works. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, completely. Shifting gears a little bit to, I launched a content site back in April, and I've brought a lot of my perspective from my entrepreneurial journey to help impact those who are going through similar things. But I really wanted to think beyond just the day-to-day work of being an entrepreneur and how are you balancing other important areas of life. And I think one aspect, especially women don't talk a lot about, is personal finance. And as an investor, as an entrepreneur, how do you think about the personal side of how you manage your finances? And also, how do you think about the trade-off between saving, but also living the kind of lifestyle you want to live?
That is a tough one as an entrepreneur, as a woman. I also, the way I was raised, I had to get over this. And recently I've done a lot of work. But I always thought of, no matter how much money I had in the bank, I always thought I was going to be a bag lady, like broken. My mom was always living, paycheck to paycheck, having to put herself through school and raising 2 girls. And I think we always felt the stress of, like, we can't afford that. We can't afford that. Like, we really wanted kids, and she did not want to get us kids. And I look at every shoe in my closet now, and I think that's because I didn't have those kids. Damn it! Like, it's I've now really realized I want to be able to live a full and generous life. Generosity to me is one of my financial pillars because it gives me so much joy, and I have to manage my finances in that way, knowing that if somebody's going to want to have a baby shower, I'm hosting it. I'm buying dinner for any of my team, and I of course want to be able to also give back to the communities that have built me, and that really gives me joy. So knowing that I have to create my finances around that, and realize that sometimes it means I can't have the shoe and the hair and all the things, and it's just me. I also think that's a very different approach. Like, a lot of times if you have a family and you have a husband, you think dual incomes. And in my case, I have pretty much my whole life been just me in terms of the way that I think of my finances. And that can be scary too. So, but the scarcity mentality is never going to get you there.
Never will, right?
It's abundance, 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 and then really good managers, really good people in your life to help you understand your finances.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know earlier you talked a little bit about the impact that your family had on your level of, ambition and sort of relentless approach to being successful, maybe even being perfect. Would you describe yourself as a perfectionist, and how has your definition of perfection changed over time?
It's funny. I always think about Taylor Swift. Of course, I'm a Swiftie. Can't do this interview without talking about Tay. But there's a song she has called Mirror Ball that is really, it it is exactly the way I feel about perfectionism. And but she says I've never been a natural. All I do is try, try, try. And that's been me. I'll see something, I want to go get it, and I try so hard to go get it. So I look at perfectionism as like that is not the goal. But every day I struggle to fight against it, because the only way that I would get love or that people would pay attention to me is if I did everything right. And it works. Like I became an All-American volleyball player. I got a scholarship to school. I got an Emmy. I did all of that. And that's the highest that you can get. So you have to kind of be perfect to be that. But that's not happiness at all.
Exactly.
And I think Taylor Swift would, I mean, look at how successful she's been and how under the spotlight. It's such a different world. But the trying and knowing that you're not a natural and continuing to try is not leading to perfectionism. It's leading to getting to a goal that you want. And like, it's going to be messy along the way. And I have to embrace that every day. I hate perfectionism because it's a jail. It's an ivory tower, and it's never going to give you the happiness that you need or want. And it's silly.
Right. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve the purpose.
Not at all.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, I just had her stay. She was just staying with me, and she's a wildly successful female comedian. Her name also is Whitney, and so like I only hang out with people with that name. She's struggled with that too. She's a female comic. There are not a lot of female comics. She always says I have to work twice as hard to get half as far, and that's also like a perfectionist mindset too. But it's true, you know. And it's not easy when you're in, less than 2% women in private equity, less than 2% women that are stand-up comedians, to say the least. And then to be judged by also her looks when these men can go out there with these big pot bellies, and like Bert Kreischer, he literally does his entire stand-up routine with his big beer belly.
Right.
And they like make fun of Whitney getting Botox.
Yeah.
You know,
it's crazy. It's crazy. So basically what you're saying is sometimes the feeling of needing to work harder isn't just this thing in your head, but society kind of makes it that way, right?
When you're in the upper echelons of pushing that glass ceiling, and you are in the room, you're in the boardroom, and there's only two of you, you look at perfectionism as the only way, because you don't want to look any different than those people. Exactly. But why you're in there is because you're imperfect, because you look different. And you're qualified. Yeah. So embrace that shit. Embrace that imperfection.
Absolutely.
And like the whole thing where people say, fake it till you make it, that is such bad advice. No, fucking don't fake anything. Ask a lot of questions and get a lot of great advisors. And if you can't ask them to the people in the room you're with because they're going to look at you in a different way, then find some people you can ask them to. And then go into that room with the answers.
Completely. Yeah. And I also find too that whole fake it till you make it method, it's almost as if you're losing the opportunity to really learn and develop because you're more focused on the perception of looking a certain way than actually being that thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
yes.
Completely. Well, I know that we have so many listeners and viewers that are, aspiring to do a lot of the things that you've done, whether it's, become an executive at a big company or, start a business or join private equity. What's one piece of advice for someone who maybe is unsure or sort of doubting whether or not they can do it?
I guess that it's sort of this like a panacea that I couldn't really tell you. It's like, I think your journey and this shit storm that I mentioned at the top is so personal that like one piece of advice seems such a disservice to each person's shit show, And that I guess I'd say like embrace that shit show, going back to like creating too many goals. If you miss what's happening in between your goals, you're missing actually the goals.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think that is the advice. That is the perspective, right?
It is, because you're right. That is a different journey. Everybody's things that they're missing in between, the moments that they think that they're supposed to be.
Right.
Putting the goals down.
Exactly.
I mean, I would love to know if you were just think of the 3 seminal things that happened to you, like the things that that were game changers.
Right.
And then you try to plot your way to get those, that you back your way into getting those.
Right.
There was something that happened that it was in between the lines that happened to get you there.
Exactly.
That you could never have written goal number 1. Here's how I get there. Step 1, step 2, step 3.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
Exactly. I mean, I actually think really all you need to do to get to the place that you want to get to is having some semblance of a vision. And your vision can change over time, but simply just knowing that you want something different. And then something in your life changes that kind of forces you down a different direction. And then it's just, part of it is just not overthinking it, right? But really having a vision for what it is your heart and soul wants for your life. That is, for me, the unlock to getting to the place that I ultimately want to be.
And you knowing that you wanted to stay connected with your mom and then creating a whole brand around that.
Right.
But that's the thing. Had you ever said when you were at Goldman, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to stay connected to your mom had to have an early departure from us for that to happen.
Exactly.
So yes, maybe you wanted independence or you wanted to be able to realize your dreams, but you had to take the risk, as we were saying, to leave. And so the risk combined with living in the present moment of your feelings of missing your mom and wanting to create something around that. Exactly. Like if you had just moved on to the goal next goal you had at Goldman, which was like, I'm sure defined very clearly for you in your 360.
Right.
Then you would have missed the moment in between to reconnect with your mom and miss the idea that you would have that come from it. That then,
that's right.
As you're sitting here asking me how the hell I got here.
Exactly. We're going to pivot to 5 fire facts, which is like fun. My favorite part. So that everyone could just get to know you a little bit deeper and on a more fun level. So let's kick it off. What's your favorite mantra or affirmation?
Oh, we should definitely do a Taylor Swift one.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. I love this one. And this actually is really sweet. It's in a song called Marjorie, and I always think about it because I like to be very clever, and it's not great for me in dating. But she says, never be so kind, you forget to be clever. And never be so clever, you forget to be kind.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm clever, and sometimes it's a completely missed opportunity. Yeah. But then sometimes, like, I'm too kind, and I need to be a little bit more clever.
Totally. I love that. Favorite scent?
Oh, this is embarrassing. Coppertone.
No
way. I will use Coppertone.
Like as your fragrance?
Lotion in the winter. I'm not even, like, it's probably terrible. It's got all sorts of issues because it's got sunscreen in it that is not natural. Yeah. But it smells so
like
good.
That beachy scent.
Beachy, coconutty, but I'm not okay with like putting coconut on me.
Yeah.
But it just reminds me of summer, and I have Coppertone candles that I make from Etsy. I love Coppertone.
Oh, that's so fun. Who would have known?
Yeah, it's not something that I am actively telling people that I wear Coppertone all year long. I guess I just did. Thank you, world.
Your go-to lunch meal?
I intermittent fast.
Oh, wow. So you skip lunch completely. Yes. Okay. Yes. When do you eat your first meal of the day?
3 o'clock.
Wow.
And I usually just eat like almonds or chocolate covered almonds, actually.
Wow.
And then I have like a huge blowout dinner.
So are you on the OMAD diet?
No.
Okay.
But David Sinclair's theory is, everything in moderation, including moderation, right? So at times, it's not easy. You still want to enjoy your life. And part of it is mindfulness and stress. And so if you start stressing so much about intermittent fasting, you're really reversing what you need to do.
Yeah.
But you get on a good program where you wake up, you have some black coffee, you take your supplements, and then you try to really extend it. Mm-hmm. And then on the weekends, you enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And so like if you can try to intermittent fast like 3 to 4 days a week, it just provides me a lot of clarity.
Wow. And actually on that topic, your sort of go-to most impactful supplement?
Oh, obviously Vitality. That's one that Tally makes. But truly, it is one pill that addresses all the hallmarks of longevity and aging. So I hate taking a lot of different supplements in the morning. the key was when we made this business, yes, you need to measure the rate at which you're aging, but you need intervention. And if I don't want to take 10 supplements, I want to take one.
Yeah. Same.
So we packed it all into one pill. Wow. And it's scientifically proven to reverse aging.
Wow.
So I take that pill every day, especially after I lost 4 years of my life creating that pill.
Right. Exactly. We're going to check that one out. Last one, favorite app on your phone.
I'm obsessed with TikTok.
Are you?
Actually get the PSA from TikTok that says you've been on too long. It's like, hey, you may want to move from your phone now. Like, you know what people get on Netflix that says, are you still watching?
Right.
I get the TikTok video that they put out for probably people who watch it 10 hours or 5 hours. I don't even know when it is because I'm so in the vortex.
Oh my gosh.
Because I don't Netflix and chill. I TikTok and chill.
I love that. Oh my gosh, Whitney, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being on this series with me. I mean, everything you shared was so inspiring and so valuable. Thank you so, so much.
Well, thanks also for what you are doing for women out there, selling your business, showing us all we can.
Thank you.
It fucking means a lot.
Thank you.
I told you I have a potty mouth. I told you. You're going to have to bleep me out the whole time.
No, I love it.
So I really loved my conversation with Whitney. She just had so much good perspective to share. And I want to share a few of my key takeaways with you. So Whitney talked about the fact that getting from point A to point B in your journey, it's not just about setting a series of goals that ladder up to your end result. It's really about recognizing opportunities when they happen, fully believing in your vision, and being willing to take calculated risks. So you have to get comfortable with embracing the unknown and really trusting the process as it unfolds, because you can't reverse engineer success by planning every single step. Sometimes you simply need to leap into opportunities as they come. So Whitney also shared that as an entrepreneur, you have to master the art of storytelling, especially when your unique story needs to resonate with a diverse audience. So if you are a woman entrepreneur whose business primarily serves women and you find yourself pitching in a room full of men, your approach just needs to be strategic. So it's not just about sharing what your business does, it's about educating your audience. So you have to explain clearly why your business fulfills an unmet need and why it matters, even to those who are not your core consumer. So Whitney also talked about the fact that perfectionism may seem like the way to achieve success, but it's important to realize that it actually rarely leads to happiness or the results that you're hoping for. So instead of embracing the fake it till you make it mantra, embrace what makes you you, because when you prioritize real growth over what others perceive of you, you'll enhance your skills and cultivate self-confidence that will bring you closer to your goals. So those were just a few of my key takeaways from my conversation with Whitney. I love these conversations so much because I learned so much, and I really hope you did too. To stay connected with Whitney, the Makers Mindset community, and me, check out all of the details in the episode description below, and don't forget to subscribe to this series, leave a review, and share this episode with your community. Thanks so much for tuning in.